In February 1959, 9 experienced hikers skied into the northern Ural Mountains. By the time anyone found them, the story had already stopped making sense. This is the actual cover of the criminal case, open to explain what happened to them. It's still being reopened, 65 years later. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student and one of the most experienced ski tourers at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. 8 of the 9 were students or graduates of that same institute. They'd hiked together before. This wasn't a group of amateurs walking into danger blind. Among them, Zinaida Kolmogorova, one of only 2 women on the trip, and Lyudmila Dubinina, a passionate hiker who kept the group's spirits up on hard days. Their plan was a Grade 3 route, the hardest classification in Soviet skiing, through the Ural wilderness to a peak called Otortin. They were required to send a telegram the moment they returned. Dyatlov himself had estimated the date, no later than February 12th. On January 27th, a 10th member, Yuri Yudin, turned back early with knee pain. He said goodbye to 9 friends he'd see again in newspapers, not in person. By most accounts, spirits stayed high after Yudin left. There's a war newspaper the group made that night, full of inside jokes, nothing that reads like foreboding. The remaining 9 pushed on into terrain that got colder and emptier with every mile. By January 31st, they'd reached the edge of the tree line at the base of a mountain the local Mansi people called Kolatsyakhl. In the Mansi language, that name means Dead Mountain. It had carried that name for generations before this group ever set foot on it. February 1st was supposed to be a short, easy day. Descend toward the valley, make camp somewhere sheltered by trees. Instead, for reasons nobody has ever fully explained, they pitched their tent on the open slope of the mountain itself. It was a strange decision from a group that experienced. Losing the trail in worsening weather is the leading theory, but they never wrote down why. Their diary entries from that day mention wind and poor visibility. Nothing that reads like fear. Nothing that reads like anyone expected what came next. This map, built from their own diary and the search records, shows exactly where that tent sat and how far it was from any shelter. February 12th came and went. No telegram arrived. Families started asking questions the university couldn't answer. By February 20th, delay had become alarm. A search was authorized. Student volunteers first, then the military, then aircraft. For 6 days, searchers combed a mountain range the size of a small country with no real idea whether they were even looking in the right place. Radio contact with the base camp was patchy at best. Every night, the search teams reported back the same thing. Nothing. Temperatures on the ridge that week dropped past -25. Wind strong enough that searchers roped themselves together just to stay standing. Then, on February 26th, a search dog handler named Boris Slobtsov spotted something the wind hadn't quite buried: a tent, collapsed under snow, half flattened, but still staked into the slope exactly where the group had pitched it 3 weeks earlier. What they found when they dug it out is the detail every retelling of this case starts with, because nothing about it makes sense. The tent had been cut open, not at the entrance, from the inside, with a knife, in at least 2 places. Every piece of outdoor gear was still inside. Coats, boots, the stove, even the food. Whatever made 9 experienced hikers cut their way out of their own shelter in temperatures near 30 below, it didn't give them time to dress. Footprints led away from the tent. Bare feet, socked feet, no boots, heading downhill, toward the trees, over half a mile away. This is the actual photograph search teams took of the tent the day they found it. Investigators followed the footprints for as long as the snow let them. They led straight downhill, in a fairly organized line, not scattered. Whatever drove them out of that tent, The tracks alone don't look like 9 people panicking in 9 directions. It looked like they left together, which raises the harder question. What could make an entire experienced group agree, wordlessly, to run barefoot into a blizzard? 1.5 kilometers downhill, at the edge of the forest, searchers found the first 2 bodies under a large cedar tree. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, barefoot, in their underwear. The cedar's lower branches were broken off, up to 5 meters high. Someone had climbed that tree hard enough to snap branches under their own weight, probably trying to see something or reach for higher ground. Below the tree, the remains of a small fire, barely enough to warm 2 hands, let alone 2 freezing bodies. Between the cedar and the tent, searchers found 3 more: Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Rustem Slobodin. Their positions told a story of their own, each one further from the cedar than the last, as if, one at a time, they'd tried to climb back to the tent. Slobodin made it furthest. He also had a skull fracture serious enough on its own to be fatal and kept moving anyway. 5 bodies found, 4 still missing. The search for them would take another 2.5 months. It wasn't until May, when the snow finally melted, that searchers found the last 4 in a ravine, under 4 meters of it. Alexander Kolevatov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, Semyon Zolotaryov, Lyudmila Dubinina. Zolotaryov didn't quite fit the group. He was 37, far older than the students, and joined the trip late, almost on a whim. That single detail, an outsider joining a tight-knit group of students at the last minute, has fueled more speculation than almost anything else in the case. These 4 were dressed differently than the first 5. Some of their clothes had been cut from the bodies found earlier, stripped, not stolen, which meant some of the group had survived long enough after the others died to strip their friends' bodies for warmth. That detail alone rules out a single instant of shared panic. Whatever happened at that tent, some of them lived with it for hours. The autopsies made everything worse, not clearer. 5 of the 9 died of hypothermia. Straightforward, if brutal, given what they were wearing. The other 4 told a different story. Thibault-Brignol had a fractured skull. Zolotaryov and Dubinina had multiple broken ribs, the kind of force you see in a car crash. And here's the detail that still stops investigators cold. None of them had the bruising or soft tissue damage those injuries should have left behind. It's the kind of contradiction that shouldn't exist. Enough blunt force to crush ribs and skull, with almost nothing on the skin to show for it. Dubinina was also missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips, later attributed controversially to decomposition in running water, not violence. Some clothing recovered from the group tested positive for radioactive contamination, far above background levels, on a trip that had no obvious source for it. By May 1959, the investigation had a stack of evidence and no single theory that explained all of it at once. The official case was closed a few weeks later. This is the actual termination order. Its stated cause of death. Quote, "A compelling natural force the hikers couldn't overcome." It doesn't say what that force was. The files were sealed. The case stayed effectively closed and unexplained for the next several decades. In that silence, theories multiplied. Some reasonable, some not. All of them trying to explain the same 9 unbroken facts. The most straightforward theory is an avalanche. Snow breaking loose above the tent, forcing a panicked, barefoot escape. Here's the terrain model of that exact slope. Built from decades of surveys, the shape of the ground the theory has to explain. For decades, this theory had a problem. No visible avalanche debris. The original 1959 search teams walked that slope and reported none. In 2021, a research team modeled something more specific. A small, delayed slab of snow, the kind that leaves almost no trace. Their simulation showed that even a modest slab on that exact slope angle could injure without burying, matching the fractures without matching a dramatic snow wall. The case reopened in 2019 largely because relatives of the group never stopped asking. 6 decades of letters, petitions, and one persistent question: why won't anyone show their work? It's the theory Russian investigators formally adopted when they reopened the case in 2019. Officially, the mystery is solved. Unofficially, plenty of people who've spent years on this case still aren't convinced. It doesn't explain the radiation. It doesn't explain the missing tongue. And it doesn't fully explain the timeline. Bodies dying in stages, hours apart, from what's supposed to be a single, sudden slide. Other theories have circled this case for decades. Infrasound, wind moving across the ridge at a frequency that can trigger panic and nausea in the human body. Military testing, a parachute mine, or weapons trial nearby, covered up by a state that controlled every part of the investigation. A Mansi attack was floated early on and dismissed just as quickly. The only footprints at the tent belonged to the group itself. There's also paradoxical undressing, a real documented late-stage hypothermia symptom where the body, confused by failing blood vessels, suddenly feels overheating instead of freezing. It could explain some of the missing layers. It doesn't explain a knife cut from the inside before anyone had started freezing at all. None of these theories have ever fully closed the case for the people who've studied it longest. What's left, after 65 years, is a short list of facts nobody disputes. 9 trained, experienced people cut their way out of a safe shelter, in temperatures that kill in under an hour. They walked away from it together, not scattered, toward the one thing that might have saved them, and never made it back. 4 of them died from injuries that still don't fully match any single explanation on the table. And whatever it was, it happened fast enough, and strangely enough, that 65 years of investigators still can't agree on the same story. Yuri Yudin, the 10th hiker, the one who turned back with knee pain, lived until 2013. He spent much of his life being asked why he survived. He never had an answer that satisfied anyone, including himself. He used to say the only thing he was sure of was that he missed his friends. The mountain the Mansi named Dead Mountain long before anyone climbed it is still called that today. Not because of what happened there in 1959, it already had the name, which means, in a strange way, the mountain was named for something no one has ever been able to explain. Twice, every few years, someone reopens the file. New scientists, new models, new attempts at the same 9 facts. The pass still looks almost exactly like it did that winter. Nobody has ever fully explained why 9 people ran into it.